welcome to Leading at a Higher Level in the Nantucket. Today we're joined by Dr. David Karow, CEO of the Human Longevity Institute, but you really describe yourself as a physician scientist. So
Correct.
Share with our learners not only what you're doing at HLI, but what is HLI doing?
Yeah. Yes, I'm a physician scientist by training and came to HLI via academic medicine, where I had spent some time developing biomarkers of chronic age-related disease. So everything from Alzheimer's disease, prostate cancer, breast cancer. The idea of putting multiple biomarkers together, imaging, genomic, blood biomarkers. And as HLI got interested in a comprehensive multimodal assessment of a person's health, I transitioned from academics over to HLI, first as the chief of Radiogenomics and most recently as the interim CEO.
That's great. So share with our learners, so data-driven health intelligence, that's something that kind of jumped out at me when I was doing some intro, and I have quite a long intro of what HLI does and how you do it.
Yes.
But can you explain to our learners, the process?
Yeah. So, the way I like to think about it is we use, Mark, I'm sure you use in your daily life data to drive a lot of decisions,
right.
Decision support. And if you think about I flew in on a Cessna to get to the island today, and of course, data was guiding that pilot, right?
Right.
The altimeter, all the other dials and measures and metrics. Same with your car has 1,000 sensors. You make investment decisions based on data. Our social media is data-driven. So, why is it that our own decisions for health and wellness, precision medicine are not so data-driven? And, I think at its roots, the company's mission is to provide data to drive decision support for our patients and clients so they can live a longer, healthier life.
That's great. Well, that's definitely inspirational. So you're really giving people good data to make better decisions and hopefully make some shifts in their lifestyle.
Exactly.
Essentially.
I mean, if you think about, this may almost seem cliche, but if you think about what's been guiding decision support for health and wellness over the years, it's kind of been a superficial assessment, an annual physical exam, guided by typically a stethoscope, a reflex hammer, and a tongue depressor. If we want to know about family history, a physician will generally ask you, what did mom and dad have? And that hasn't served us very well. We have significant morbidity, mortality. We only invest 2% of our healthcare system in prevention. And so our whole sort of theory of the case is that we can do much better if we're data-driven. I like to say, and this is maybe the cliche part, that we've been looking at our patients with a flashlight, and we really need to look at our patients with a Hubble telescope, right? We need to be much more data-driven.
Because the technology is there and you can do it.
Exactly.
Exactly. So with your clients, how do you set that vision? And it's a two-part question. So the scientists and the people working at HLI, how do you set the vision and inspire them?
Right.
But also with your clients, how do you get them to come in and actually sign on? Because I would imagine, there's some cost to it, but I think the cost probably focusing on wellness on the front end is much, much lower than fixing something on the back end, right?
Right. No, that's exactly right. And I think in terms of the vision that we set for our company and our employees, is in a way very similar to the vision that we present to our patients and clients. And our overall sort of mission in a way is to use complex data guided by artificial intelligence and machine learning to extend the healthy human lifespan. And what that means really in practice is that we want for our clients to live to the age of 128 and die doing something they love, not of disease. And that sounds like aspirational pie in the sky, but we really have it in our hands right now, the ability to do that. We're just simply, not guiding that decision support because we're not giving our patients and clients data.
That's interesting. So what about the, I was telling some people that you were coming on the show because I was really excited to have you, and I think it's such a, this whole area of wellness and work-life balance is so important to our nation and the world economy for that matter.
Yes.
But I was explaining to them what you do, and like sometimes I get the reaction like, well, I don't think I want to know that much.
Right.
Like how do you get patients or your clients through that kind of
Yeah.
assumed constraint.
Yeah. Well, I would say that at the end of the day, if we have someone who's like really stubborn and just doesn't want to know, they're probably not our client.
Right.
But we don't stop at no, right? So we let's take dementia, for example. Actually, when we started our clinic 3 years ago, we got feedback from a number of our patients that they didn't want to know about the risk for dementia. And it was largely because it's perceived that you can't do anything about it, even if you know your risk. And actually, that's just false. It's just completely false. 1/3 of the risk, it turns out, for Alzheimer's and other dementias is modifiable, i.e. it's in your control. And those risk factors that are modifiable include blood pressure, cholesterol, alcohol use, sleep, BMI, visceral adipose tissue, liver fat. And so if I can tell you, if you're at risk for dementia, and we can show you that risk 10 years before disease onset, and we discover that your number one modifiable risk factor is lowering your cholesterol or lowering your BMI, and we give you that data, that's a whole different conversation than just saying, hey, Mark, lose weight. Right. So I think, the idea is to really give data-driven health intelligence long before disease onset.
Well, it really talks even more about setting the vision. So you're setting a new vision for someone based on data.
Exactly.
You're setting a journey out. Just say, look, if you think you're going to get dementia, let's first see if you have the signs or the markers, and then you're laying out a path how to avoid.
Exactly.
Right? That's amazing. I mean, I think people having to have that vision on a personal, wellness journey is really important.
Thanks. In a way, and I think it's part of a global sort of vision of the company, which is to move the needle on healthcare from sick care to well care. And we like to say we're doing it one patient at a time. But if you think, Mark, if you think about where the healthcare system is today, we spend 17% of GDP, $3 trillion, only 2% on prevention, and largely it's sick care, right? We largely find disease based on symptoms. So, take bladder cancer. The most common way it's discovered, unfortunately, is after symptoms, right? Blood in the urine, or we call that hematuria. And if you think about sort of version 2.0 of healthcare, it's what I call pre-symptomatic diagnosis, which is we're going to find that bladder cancer long before symptoms when it's at its earliest stage. And we might do that with MRI, we might do that with genomics. But I think the future of true sort of healthcare and well care is, and it's really the promise of artificial intelligence, that I'll give you your risk for bladder cancer based on everything I know about you, Mark, and then 10 years before disease onset, you can modify or mitigate that risk by doing X, Y, and Z, and you never get the disease in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think that's how, you get to living to an age, the age of 100, living healthily to the age of 100, and dying doing something you love, not of chronic age-related disease.
So you're really working to reduce the cost of healthcare, maybe get that 17% of GDP down.
Exactly. Exactly. Because we're not getting great, results for our spend. Actually, another statistic which is compelling but unfortunate is that, and it's not just a U.S. problem, it's really a global problem. If you live to the age of 50 in this country, 1 in 3 of us won't make it to the age of 75. Right. And, when I first heard that statistic, I'm like, oh, come on, that can't be true. And then I looked at my own family tree. It was actually worse.
Wow.
Seriously. So, that's what we're getting for our $3 trillion of investment.
Yeah,
and it's, the data that we have, I think reads like an indictment in a way of the current healthcare system, where so much is spent on the reactive side, not on the proactive side.
Yeah, and life expectancy is actually going down in this country now, which is just ridiculous.
Yep.
I mean, how can that be with the level of healthcare that we have?
Yep.
More well care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So walk us through, so if a client is embracing data, not afraid of the data,
right,
and comes into HLI, like what's the experience like?
Right. So we, in a way, I like to think we offer our patients and clients sort of two buckets. One is a data-driven precision health assessment. So you're going to know, Mark's going to know his condition today. Do I have a tumor? Do I have aneurysm? Do I have advanced coronary artery plaque? But I'm also going to know about, and you're going to know about your risk for chronic age-related disease in the future, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So that's super important. That's the data-driven precision health assessment. But more importantly, if I'm going to convince you to come in the first place and then come back and see us every year, I've got to create a space that you at least are neutral about, but hopefully even sort of favorable, right? That you'll come back, you'll come see us, you'll enjoy yourself, you'll be relaxed, sort of a spa-like setting. If I've got sort of like a communist-style health clinic, Mark's not coming back to see me again, right?
Or no referral.
Yeah, or certainly no referral. So, the idea is to really, both create a precision health space and also in that space, a data-driven precision health platform and assessment.
That's great. Well, we're going to take a quick break. This is Mark Forsyth, and you're watching Leading at a Higher Level Nantucket. And today we're joined by Dr. David Karow, physician scientist. Great. I like that title.
Thank you, Mark. So do I.
We'll be right back.
Great.
Leading at a Higher Level Nantucket is brought to you by the Ken Blanchard Companies and FT Press, an imprint of the world's learning company, Pearson, whose mission is helping people make progress in their lives through learning. The new third edition of Ken Blanchard's Leading at a Higher Level is available at informate.com/Nantucket.
Welcome back to Leading at a Higher Level. This is Mark Forsyth, and today we're joined by David Karow, a physician scientist and interim CEO at Human Longevity Institute. So we were just talking about a little bit about what your clients experience when they go to HLI. What about your employees, your associates? How do you create a motivated workforce? Why do people join HLI? I mean, it's an amazing vision. You're doing incredible, groundbreaking, first mover work.
Right.
So I would imagine that's a pretty attractive, right? Yeah. So tell us about your employees and the.
I think our employees have in common, actually, with the management team and with our board and our investors, frankly, that they're very mission driven, right? So they appreciate, like our clients, frankly, that the current healthcare system is broken. Again, we spend most of our spend and effort on reactivity rather than being proactive. And so I think first and foremost, our employees are motivated by sort of this mission-driven concept. Again, changing the healthcare system from sick care to well care, one patient at a time. So, I think that's probably the biggest motivator for folks to join the company. As we've accelerated our business plan and now have partnerships beyond our clinic in San Diego, I think that's given our employees an additional carrot to stick around, which is that, yes, we have a successful clinic in San Diego, but we're also now exporting and scaling and democratizing what we're doing to multiple U.S. geographies and hopefully international. Because at the end of the day, if I'm serving, high net worth individuals, that's great and super important, but we want to be able to offer this platform eventually to a much wider swath of the population. And so as our costs come down, our price point comes down, we're able to democratize, demonetize, dematerialize. We can truly get this out to serve millions, perhaps billions, honestly, rather than thousands.
So will you be setting up other campuses or other clinics for people to go to? Or what type of partnerships are you doing to kind of reach? I could see why that would motivate your workforce, because they can say, "Ooh, I have a possibility of going to X,"
right?
Or getting hired. Might be, though. Moving to San Diego is not so bad.
Yeah, well, there's that. I'd like to think if we were, I'm from outside of Detroit originally. I'd like to think if we were outside Detroit, we'd still have the same motivated workforce. But it's true that there's a motivator by geography.
Yeah.
But I think. It's one thing, again, to have a clinic in La Jolla. It's a beautiful clinic, spa-like setting. But another to contemplate being able to affect, nearly every person on this planet with data-driven precision health. Yeah. And that may sound like pie in the sky, but, if we do it right, that's what we can do. That every human being will be able to sort of guide decision support for health and wellness based on data. And I call it sort of the Uberization of precision health. We want to be the company that sort of scales, democratizes, dematerializes, demonetizes precision health.
So to what degree, is that based on your employees actually, doing the data analysis versus something like machine learning or I'm sure there's a balance, right? It's just not all machine learning, but what is that
balance?
Percent? Yeah, what is that balance?
It's a great question. You asked also, what motivates our employees. I think one of the, longstanding tenets of the company is to invest in science, do it well, have high quality science, and along with kind of a mission driven employee base, that tenet of the company is super important. So we have, from the very beginning of the company, co-founded by Craig Venter, we've had over 60 plus publications, high impact journals, Nature Science, Nature Genetics. And so that is super important for our employees, knowing that we're investing critically in the imaging sciences, in the genomic sciences, in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so as we think about what we can offer our clients and patients, it's a result of those years of investments in sort of getting the science right.
So for your employees, do they feel like they're working at a high-tech company, or do they feel like they're working at a healthcare clinic? What's the culture like? What's the feeling like there?
Right. I think it's a little bit of both.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
In La Jolla, we have our corporate headquarters, and that's where we do a lot of sort of the big data. The idea is that, and we're sort of agnostic to data, right? We have our own data that we've collected. We have close to 40,000 whole genomes that we've sequenced. We have now close to 5,000 patients who have come through the health nucleus and undergone testing. So, that data actually sort of creates this kind of positive, virtuous feedback cycle where the more data that we get, the more powerful our risk prediction algorithms. So on the one hand, we have many employees, our technology team, our scientists, who are working to improve those algorithms. On the other hand, we have a working functional clinic that's actually reducing that science to clinical practice. And so I think you do have, some would say it's sort of schizophrenic, but I think it's very complementary to have, a science. It's pretty rare to be able to translate into clinical practice, scientific discoveries, in the short term. And I think that's what we do.
That's great. That's fantastic. So what, in that context, what's the culture like? And especially even from the leadership team level, from the CEO level, what's the leadership culture like, and how does that permeate down into the organization?
Right. Well, I think a part of that is leading with our science, right? And having integrity around that. So and I think that sort of permeates through the entire company. What's good for a peer-reviewed publication is also going to be good for our patients. And so the idea that we're leading with peer-reviewed science is super important. I think that's part of the culture that we have. There's certain sort of buzzwords that we could throw around, integrity, professionalism, and so forth. But I think if we want to get a little more granular, it's about, leading with our science.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're really in an inspiring space, and really doing, I love that concept of well care. Yeah. What about?
Just on that thread, if you think about it, a lot of folks are talking about artificial intelligence right now.
Yep.
And if you go to any healthcare conference, JP Morgan included, everyone's talking about how artificial intelligence is going to change the practice of medicine. And actually, we heard this roughly 19 years ago with the sequencing of the first human genome, right?
Right.
And this was going to usher in the so-called genomic era. It was going to change the clinical practice of medicine. And that really hasn't happened. You're hearing that right now with AI, right? Everyone's talking about AI. It's going to change the practice of medicine. And I like to say our company is actually reducing AI to clinical practice. So our dementia risk predictions, some of the other working models of chronic age-related disease are driven by AI and machine learning. So again, that's part of our culture, is to be able to use next generation advanced multimodal analytics, bound by AI to give our patients the latest generation of decision support and data.
That sounds very, very innovative place to work, it sounds like.
Yes, yes.
On the cutting edge, no less. So let's talk a little bit more about your clients and who's coming to HLI. I just assume this is more of attracted to an older clientele, but what you said earlier is actually younger people are coming in. Can you tell us why and what's the difference?
Yeah. So it's a great question. When we initially started, it's true, we had most of the folks when they're 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. But our median age is now 52, and it's really trended younger. And I think, it is interesting. Actually, we've had a number of life-altering findings that we've seen in folks in their 30s, whether it's coronary artery disease, aneurysms, even, early-stage high-grade papillary thyroid cancer. But I think the real reason we're getting younger folks coming in is that, the same data and decision support that we're offering for folks to extend their healthy human lifespan is the same data that you can use to generate high performance, right? And so if you think about, liver fat, for example, elevated liver fat is a biomarker of pre-diabetes. And so it would be an early sign that you have diabetes long before your hemoglobin A1C is elevated or your fasting blood glucose. But it turns out having elevated liver fat is also altering your performance right now.
Sure.
Right? So you're not jumping out of bed in the morning. You're not as energetic at work. You're not as energetic caring for your family. So this whole idea that we're sort of generating kind of a prescription and a recipe for longevity is also a prescription and a recipe for high performance. And so we talk about at HLI kind of the 10 tenets of longevity. And, we could argue about, which tenets belong in there or which ones don't belong in there. But, we like to say sleep is number one, because if you're not sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, forget it. You have no chance of living to 100. There's only very few of us who can actually get by with 6 hours of sleep. Most of us need that 7 or 8. So you just got to get it, right? And we like to say that most of the other tenets serve that one. So if you're not exercising right, if you're not eating right, you're probably not going to be sleeping right either. But in those tenets for longevity is also know your numbers, right? So if you're doing all the right things, if you're practicing yoga, if you're eating kale and you're vegan, but you don't know that you have a gene that's putting you at risk for breast or prostate cancer in your 40s, doesn't matter what else you're doing, right? So it turns out that knowing your numbers is really important, not only for longevity, but also for high performance. So we like to say, in a way, longevity is longevity is high performance, and the same assessment that drives decision support for longevity goes into driving decision support for high performance.
That's great. I love those tenets. It's a good way to live by. Knowing your numbers, it's not just your weight and your blood pressure, right? You're talking about really know your numbers.
Well, that's exactly right. When we didn't get into the data, Mark, but when we look at the presumed healthy individuals that come through the health nucleus, we're finding that 40% have life-altering, clinically significant disease they didn't previously know about.
That's
right?
amazing.
So knowing those numbers turns out to be super important. And also to that point, we sort of evangelize this idea of a program, not a pill. Now, I'll be the first one to say, as a physician, that there is absolutely a place in modern medicine for pharmacotherapy medicine. If you have super high blood pressure, for instance, you probably need to be on, a water pill or an ACE inhibitor. But for most of us, most chronic age-related disease is on a bell curve. We have slightly higher or slightly lower risk. We probably don't need to be on that statin. We probably don't need to be on that blood pressure medication. We can control it with lifestyle changes. But you got to know in the first place that you've got, risk factors for disease. You got to know your numbers. So that's super important to our patients, that we can put them on a path, a journey where they can sort of throw out the pills, take control, sort of be the CEO of their own healthcare. And yes, part of that is sleeping well and eating right and exercising and building muscle mass, but it's also got to know your numbers.
Yep, and know the right numbers.
Yep, that's right.
That's great.
I would just close with the following, that of the clinically significant findings that we've made over the years, and again, it's 40%, 14% with life-altering findings. So it's 1 in 50 with new tumors, 1 in 50 with brain or aortic aneurysms, nearly 10% with advanced coronary artery plaque, 1 in 4 of our clients with rare genetic mutations that weren't previously known, like BRCA mutations or LDL receptor mutations. If you ask how many of those you could have gotten with a superficial sensor or wearable, the answer is 0. So, I love my Fitbit and Apple Watch, but it turns out if you want to make life-altering findings and decision support, you got to go deep with the data.
Yep, got it. That's great. What about, let's go shift to you. So, and most people at this stage, they get a little uncomfortable at this part of the stage, but you obviously joined HLI for a very good reason. So what were some of the key influencers in your life, not only to join HLI, but to be a physician scientist?
Right.
What are some of the key influencers in your life?
Well, in the short term, so I'm from outside the Detroit area and went to medical school at the University of Michigan, migrated to the West Coast for my postgraduate training, residency and fellowship. In fact, my fellowship training was at UCLA, and I spent a fair amount of time doing what we call sort of non-vascular interventional radiology, essentially using image-guided radiofrequency and microwave ablations of tumors. And it's pretty wild because instead of having to, spend a couple days in the hospital for a kidney or liver tumor, we can use image guidance to actually melt away a tumor with microwave or radiofrequency ablation. So literally you come in and 4 hours later, there's no complications, you're on your way out of the hospital and your tumor is gone.
Wow.
So it's pretty powerful stuff. But what I learned from my patients, when I was training and and overseeing those procedures was that often the way that the cancer was detected was sort of serendipity and was sort of capricious, right? So if I asked, an individual that we were treating, hey, how did you get your kidney tumor? More often than not, it was by chance. Well, I had abdominal ultrasound because I had some pain, and we incidentally found a renal mass.
Right.
Or, same with the liver tumors, lung tumors, notoriously, same story, right? I found my lung tumor because I had a cough and got a chest X-ray.
Right.
And I looked at that. I'm like, there's got to be a better way, right? Serendipity, chance, capriciousness should not play a role in diagnosing serious disease. So that led me on a journey to pivot into diagnostic imaging, developing biomarkers for chronic age-related disease, marrying imaging and genetics so that we don't get to that point where we're discovering tumors by chance, that we have algorithms, decision support, care pathways that allow us to find that disease at the earliest stage or really identify disease risk long before disease onset. So in terms of my own path and how I got in the short term to this point, it was really guided by interactions with patients.
Yeah, firsthand. And you see what the data looking backwards versus looking forward is what you're doing now. What about key people in your life? To become a physician, was there someone that really influenced you as a person early on? It was your parents, or is it someone, your own family doctor, or what's your story there?
Well, I wrote this when I applied for medical school. My grandmother actually suffered from Parkinson's disease, and I watched her, deteriorate over those years, and actually was, one of her caregivers. And that, as you know, is a really debilitating disease, both mentally and physically. And that was, one of the motivators to go into medicine in the first place. There's just got to be a better way. And actually, if we think about Parkinson's, we know so much more now than we did 20 years ago. But still, we have a lot to learn. But the one thing we do know is Parkinson's dementia, just like Alzheimer's, if I can identify that you're at risk for Parkinson's, there's actually a fair amount that you can do to either, prolong disease-free symptoms, maybe eventually even, protect against getting the disease in the first place. So it turns out that a lot of lifestyle changes, eating right, diet and exercise, it may not stave off Parkinson's forever, but it can give you additional years. And so that's what really motivates me, are stories like that, personal stories from my own family. We're hoping that we can, either prolong, the healthy lifespan, or in some cases eliminate the possibility that you get disease in the first place by identifying risk at the earliest stages.
Well, I'm sure your grandmother's very proud of you,
Thank
of
you.
the work you're doing.
Thank you.
So very impressive, and I'm so happy you came on the show, and thank you. I know your time here on Nantucket is quite busy, so we appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, Mark.
This is Leading at a Higher Level in Nantucket, and we'll see you next week.